Right, so get this. Today we're going deep on EMF radiation protection. And I think some of this stuff might really surprise you.
Oh, yeah. It's pretty
We're
fascinating.
going through this guide, EMF radiation protection, best practices in shielding. And it's got some stuff in there, you probably already know our devices. Like, they give off EMF radiation, but
Mhm.
have you ever actually thought about which, like, frequencies are the ones that are the most, like, concerning?
Right?
Or what the science actually says about those concerns? Like, get ready to have your assumptions, like, totally challenged.
Yeah, it's interesting how much we just kind of like take for granted, this whole invisible world of energy. Like
Yeah.
we're surrounded by this constant hum of electromagnetic fields from all our
Mhm.
devices, but we just like never really stop to think about it.
Right, exactly.
It could be having an impact on us, our biology.
Yeah, totally. And so, okay, let's break it down to the basics here. So we know there's ionizing radiation.
Uh,
It's like the kind from X-rays. Everyone knows that stuff is harmful,
Right.
but this guide is focusing on non-ionizing radiation, the stuff
mhm.
that comes from our electronics every day.
Right, exactly.
So if it's supposedly less harmful, like, why are people
Mhm.
making such a big deal about it?
Well, that is the big question, isn't it?
So,
It's true. I mean, non-ionizing radiation doesn't have like the same immediate effects as ionizing radiation. It's not going to like damage your tissue right away.
right.
But, the concern is that our bodies are basically like electrical systems, right? Like our cells communicate using these tiny little electrical impulses.
Okay.
And so the theory is that like prolonged exposure to certain EMF frequencies, it could actually like interfere with those processes.
Hold on. Are you saying that EMFs could, like, mess with how our cells talk to each other?
Yeah, potentially. I mean, that's something that researchers are like actively looking into.
Okay.
Yeah, some studies suggest like potential links, between long-term EMF exposure and things like sleep disturbances, headaches, even like cellular changes. But this is where it gets like interesting, right? Because not every study shows, conclusive evidence. And there's just so much that we still don't know about, like the long-term effects.
So what are we supposed to do? Are we supposed to ditch all our electronics and, like, go live in a Faraday cage?
Well, I mean, not necessarily.
Okay.
This guide, it's like, it takes a really practical approach.
So,
It's all about giving you knowledge, and like empowering you to just take reasonable steps to minimize those risks.
okay.
Think of it as like a cost-benefit analysis. We're weighing, the amazing benefits of technology against the potential downsides, and we're just trying to find a way to like optimize how we interact with it.
I like that. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about those steps then, because this guide has a surprisingly long list of EMF sources. I mean, it's way beyond, like, just our cell phones. It's kind of crazy.
Oh, yeah. It's easy to forget, how much EMF radiation is just like all around us in the modern world. We're talking Wi-Fi routers, laptops, microwaves, smart meters, even like electric cars.
Smart meters. I didn't even realize those were a thing.
Yeah, for sure. They definitely contribute to like our overall exposure.
Wow.
Yeah, they use like a 900 millihertz frequency to transmit data wirelessly. And some studies, they've linked this specific frequency to sleep disruptions.
Oh, wow.
So it's not even just about like the devices that we're using directly, it's also this like invisible landscape that's all around us.
Right. So it makes, like, EMF protection seem like a much bigger deal than just holding your phone away from your head.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to like understand, the differences between these different sources and frequencies.
Okay.
For example, did you know that like some research suggests that pulsed electromagnetic fields, which are like the kind that are emitted by cell phones, they could be more biologically active than the continuous wave EMFs from things like power lines.
Wait, pulsed versus continuous wave EMFs. That's, like, totally new to me. Can you, like, break that down a little bit more?
Yeah, sure. So imagine someone like tapping you on the shoulder over and over again versus like just applying constant pressure.
Okay.
The pulsed nature of those cell phone EMFs, it's thought to create like a different kind of biological interaction
Oh, wow.
compared to like the steady hum of other sources. So, I mean, the research on this is like still developing, but it's definitely a fascinating area.
Okay, yeah, I'm starting to see why it's not as simple as just saying reduce your EMF exposure,
Right.
It's more about being
Right.
strategic, right?
Right.
And understanding which sources and frequencies are, like, the bigger concerns.
Exactly.
Okay, so how do we actually take all this knowledge and turn it into action?
Right.
The guide talks about, like, Best practices for reducing exposure. So what does that actually look like in real life?
Well, I mean, it starts with being mindful of your habits and making small adjustments, like, for example, using speakerphone or headphones when you're on your cell phone.
Okay.
That can really reduce the amount of radiation that's going straight to your head.
Yeah, I've heard that before, but honestly, like, I'm so guilty of just pressing my phone to my ear, especially when I'm in a rush.
Uh-huh.
Does it really make that much of a
Oh,
difference?
yeah, it can be huge.
Okay.
Studies have shown that using a headset can decrease the radiation absorbed by your head by up to 90%.
90%. Okay, you've convinced me.
Yeah.
What else can we do?
Another really simple tip is to, like, avoid carrying your phone in your pocket.
Okay.
The closer it is to your body, the greater the potential exposure.
Yeah.
So you could keep it in a bag or on a table when you're not using it.
I'm sensing a theme here.
Yeah.
Distance.
Yeah.
The further away from the source, the better.
Exactly. It's basic physics.
Right.
The intensity of those fields decreases rapidly with distance.
Okay, so distance is key, but what about, like, all the other devices we use all the time? I can't exactly keep my laptop, like, 6 feet away from me while I'm working.
You're right. That's where some of those other best practices come in. So for instance, instead of using your laptop directly on your lap, you could try like a laptop stand or even just a simple tray to increase that distance.
Okay, I'm picturing myself working from a desk that's, like, 8 feet tall.
Right.
So my laptop is a safe distance away.
Right.
But seriously, yeah, a stand makes sense. I never thought about it like that.
And while we're on the topic of laptops, we can't forget about Wi-Fi routers.
Oh, right.
Those things are constantly emitting radiation, even when you're not like actively using the internet.
You're making me paranoid about my router now. Is it really that bad to have it on all the time?
I mean, it's not about being paranoid. It's more about just being informed, right?
Right.
The amount of radiation from a Wi-Fi router is generally considered low, but some people are just more sensitive than others. If you're concerned, you could always just turn it off at night or when you're not using it.
Okay, I'll admit I'm one of those people who leaves their Wi-Fi on 24/7.
Uh-huh.
So maybe it's time to rethink that, especially considering what you said about sleep disruptions.
Exactly. Sleep is like such a critical time for our bodies. It's when we do all of our repair and regeneration.
Right.
And so minimizing any potential disruptions, whether it's EMFs or anything else, is just like crucial for optimal health.
You're giving me a whole new perspective on my nighttime routine.
Yeah.
This is good stuff.
And speaking of creating like a low EMF sanctuary for sleep, that's where shielding techniques come in.
Shielding. Now that sounds intriguing. Tell me more.
Yeah.
I want to know more about this shielding stuff. Shielding, huh? That sounds like, I don't know, something out of a sci-fi movie or something.
Right.
But seriously, what is EMF shielding and how does it actually work?
Yeah, it's actually not as futuristic as it sounds.
Okay.
EMF shielding is basically just creating a barrier,
Oh.
something that can block or redirect those electromagnetic fields. So think of it kind of like putting up a soundproof wall, to block out noise.
Okay.
There's all sorts of different methods and materials that you can use for this, ranging from like super simple stuff to some pretty sophisticated techniques.
Okay, so it's like creating a safe haven from those invisible EMFs.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm all ears. Tell me about these shielding techniques. Like, what are we talking here? Are we talking like lead vests, underground bunkers?
Nothing quite that dramatic.
Okay.
One common approach is using EMF blocking paint.
Okay.
It's specially formulated with like conductive materials, and so often there's metallic particles in there that can absorb and dissipate EMF radiation.
So, like, if I painted my bedroom walls with this special paint,
Yeah,
I could create, like, a low EMF zone for sleeping.
exactly. That's a very popular use for it.
Wow.
Especially for like bedrooms and workspaces, places where people spend a lot of time and they want to minimize their exposure.
That makes sense.
It's important to note, though, that EMF blocking paint, it's generally more effective at blocking high-frequency radiation,
Okay.
like the kind that comes from cell towers and Wi-Fi, rather than lower frequency EMFs from things like power lines.
So it's all about understanding the different frequencies and what works best for which one, okay?
Right.
So what about those grounding sheets you mentioned before?
Yeah.
Do those fall under the shielding umbrella?
Grounding sheets are a little bit different.
Okay.
They work on the principle of electrical grounding,
Uh-huh.
which involves like connecting your body to the Earth's electrical potential.
Okay.
The idea is that this can help to neutralize any excess electrical charges in your body
Okay.
that might be caused by, EMS exposure.
Grounding sheets. I'm trying to, like, picture how that actually works.
Yeah.
Are we talking, like, literal wires connecting me to the ground while I sleep.
No, no.
That doesn't sound very comfortable.
It's much more subtle than that. Grounding sheets, they usually have these conductive threads woven into them.
Okay.
And those threads are connected to a grounding wire that you just plug into a grounded outlet.
Okay.
So it just creates a pathway for those electrical charges to flow from your body to the earth, essentially grounding you.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense, but I'm a little skeptical. Does the science actually back up those claims about grounding sheets and EMF protection?
Yeah, that's a fair question.
Yeah.
The research on grounding is still kind of preliminary.
Okay.
There's no, definitive consensus yet on how effective it is for, EMF-related issues.
Okay.
Some studies have shown some really promising results, though.
Okay.
They suggest that grounding could improve sleep, reduce inflammation, even, influence your heart rate variability.
Wow.
But more research is definitely needed to fully understand, how it all works and, the long-term benefits.
So it's one of those things where more research is needed, but, the anecdotal evidence is compelling enough for some people to give it a shot. Yeah, I can see the appeal of, feeling more connected to the earth, even if it's just through a sheet.
For sure. And it's worth noting that grounding people use them for all sorts of reasons, not just EMF protection.
Okay.
Things like promoting relaxation, improving sleep quality in general.
Well, I'm always up for trying new things, especially if it can help me sleep better. So grounding sheets noted.
Yeah.
Okay, what other shielding techniques are out there? You mentioned Faraday cages earlier, and that sounds pretty intense.
Yeah, Faraday cages, those are the heavy hitters of EMF shielding.
Okay.
They're enclosures made from conductive materials, so typically it's a metal mesh or sheets that completely block out electromagnetic fields.
So if you're really serious about blocking EMFs, Faraday cage is the way to go.
Right.
Is that those little pouches they sell to protect your credit cards from electronic theft?
Exactly. Those pouches are basically mini Faraday cages. They work by creating that conductive barrier, preventing any electromagnetic signals from getting in or out.
That's so cool.
And yeah, if you wanted to, you could theoretically build a Faraday cage around your whole house.
I'm picturing a metal mesh house, something out of a dystopian novel.
Right.
But that's fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
So it seems like there's a whole spectrum of shielding options, from everyday adjustments to full-blown Faraday cage living.
Right. And the approach you choose really just depends on your individual needs and concerns.
Okay, so let's say I'm convinced I want to incorporate some level of EMF shielding into my life.
Huh?
Where do I even begin?
Well, I think it's important to assess your own specific needs and priorities first.
Okay.
So what are your main concerns about EMF exposure? What are your goals for reducing it?
Right.
Once you have a good understanding of your needs, then you can start looking at the different shielding options and seeing what makes sense for you.
It's making me think about all the different EMF sources in my own home now.
Yeah.
I'm wondering which ones are actually the most significant.
Right. And that's a great starting point.
Okay.
The next step would be to research the different shielding options that are out there and see what resonates with you. There's tons of resources online, product reviews, comparisons, all that stuff.
This has been a real eye-opener. It's amazing how much I didn't know about EMF shielding.
It's a fascinating field.
It really is.
And it's constantly evolving, as technology changes and we learn more about EMFs.
Yeah, for sure.
It's always changing.
Okay, so I'm definitely feeling more empowered now to take control of my EMF environment.
That's great.
But before we wrap up, I have to ask, are there any downsides or drawbacks to EMF shielding? Is it possible to go overboard with it?
Yeah, that's a really important question.
Yeah.
While EMF shielding can be a really valuable tool, for reducing your exposure, it's super important to approach it with balance and common sense.
Okay.
Going overboard with shielding could actually create some unintended consequences.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What kind of unintended consequences?
Well, for one, excessive shielding could lead to a false sense of security.
Oh, okay.
It's important to remember that shielding, it's just one piece of the puzzle. It's not the whole solution.
Right.
You still need to practice good EMF hygiene, minimizing, unnecessary device use, maintaining your distance from sources whenever possible.
So it's not a magical solution that lets you just ignore all the other best practices.
Exactly. It's more like an additional layer of protection on top of everything else.
Okay.
And another potential downside is that some shielding materials can get really expensive.
Oh, yeah.
Especially if you're looking at large-scale solutions, like EMF blocking paint for your whole house or fabrics for your entire house.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so it's important to weigh the costs and benefits before you go all in on something like that.
So it's about finding that sweet spot where you're taking those reasonable steps to reduce your exposure, but you're not breaking the bank and you're not becoming like totally obsessed with shielding.
Exactly. Finding that balance, and making it a part of your lifestyle in a way that feels sustainable and empowering.
I love that. Sustainable and empowering. That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
This whole conversation has been like such a shift in my perspective on this whole EMF radiation protection thing. I went from feeling kind of overwhelmed and confused to actually feeling informed. And
Yeah.
like I can make choices that align with, what I believe in.
It's great to hear.
Yeah, this is good stuff.
It's a journey, it's not like a one-time thing.
Right.
Our understanding of this stuff is always changing, so staying curious and being open to new information is really important.
Well, this deep dive has definitely made me more curious. I'm already thinking about like little tweaks I can make in my own life, like using speakerphone more often and just being more aware of where I'm putting my phone,
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff.
It's amazing how even small changes can really add up over time.
Right.
And as you become more aware of EMFs, and their impact, you might just find yourself naturally gravitating towards those healthier habits anyway.
We've covered so much today, from the science behind EMFs to practical tips to like all these high-tech shielding techniques.
Yeah.
But I think honestly, like the biggest takeaway for me is just the importance of balance.
I completely agree. It's not about, demonizing technology or living in fear of EMFs.
Yeah.
It's about finding that middle ground, where we can still enjoy all the amazing benefits of our modern world,
Right.
but also take steps to protect ourselves.
I like that. Well said. So for our listeners out there who are feeling inspired to take action, like what's one simple step they can take today to start reducing their EMF exposure?
I would say, start by taking inventory of the EMF sources in your home, especially in your bedroom. Are there devices you could unplug at night? Could you move your phone further away from your bed? Even those small adjustments can make a difference.
Great advice. And remember, like, it's not about being perfect.
Right.
It's about progress over perfection. Every little step you take toward reducing your exposure is a step in the right direction.
Exactly. And as you learn more and you start experimenting with different strategies, you'll find what works best for you and your needs.
This deep dive has been awesome. I feel so much more informed and empowered now.
I'd like to hear that.
Yeah, and maybe even a little bit excited to like take control of my EMF environment.
That's great.
So, listeners, as you continue to explore this topic, just remember knowledge is power.
Yeah.
The more you learn about EMF radiation protection, the more you can actually take control and prioritize your well-being.
Absolutely.
Until next time, stay curious and stay healthy and keep exploring.
Yeah. Thanks for listening.
It's kind of funny, actually, before this whole deep dive thing, the idea of EMF protection, it just felt kind of overwhelming to me.
Yeah.
Like I didn't even know where to start.
Yeah.
But now I'm realizing it doesn't have to be about becoming like some kind of tech-phobic hermit.
Right.
It's more about just making informed choices and figuring out what works for you, not going crazy.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. There's no one-size-fits-all solution here.
Right.
It's all about finding what feels right for you and your life.
Exactly. It's like empowering yourself with knowledge, and then you can make those choices that like actually fit your values and priorities.
Totally. And it's a journey, not a destination.
Right.
Our understanding of all this stuff with EMFs and their potential effects, it's always evolving.
Yeah.
So staying curious and open to new information, that's key.
This whole conversation has definitely got me thinking. I'm already like thinking about little changes I can make, like using speakerphone more often, being more mindful of where I'm putting my phone.
Yeah.
All those little things.
It's crazy how those small changes can actually make a big difference over time.
I know, right?
And as you become more aware of EMFs and how they might be affecting you, you might naturally just start making those healthier choices anyway.
We've covered a lot of ground today. Everything from like the science behind EMFs to all the practical tips to even like those high-tech shielding things.
Yeah.
But honestly, I think the biggest takeaway for me is just remembering that balance is important.
Absolutely. It's not about being afraid of technology or trying to avoid EMFs completely.
Right.
It's about finding that middle ground where you can still enjoy all the amazing things that tech brings to our lives, but also, take care of yourself at the same time.
Well said. So for our listeners who are feeling inspired, What's like one simple thing they can do today to start reducing their EMF exposure?
I'd say just start by taking a look around your home, especially your bedroom.
Okay.
Think about, like, are there any devices you could unplug at night? Can you move your phone further away from your bed? Like we said, even small changes can make a difference.
Such good advice. And remember, it's not about being perfect.
Yeah.
It's about progress, not perfection.
Exactly.
Every little step counts.
For sure.
Well, listeners, I hope this deep dive has left you feeling informed, empowered, and maybe even a little excited to take control of your EMF environment.
Me too.
Until next time, stay curious, stay healthy, and keep exploring.